I think it's safe to say that gut health has exploded in popularity in recent months and years. But there's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of confusion that surrounds the topic of gut health. So today I'm here to cut through the noise, break the nonsense and tell you exactly what you need to know about gut health. My name is Sam Gerlin. I'm the founder of Gerlin Nutrition. I'm a fully qualified nutritionist and I'm an online health coach. And today I'm going to be talking to you about exactly this, the topic of gut health. I'm going to give you a really high level, base understanding of exactly what gut health is so that you can become more informed on the topics around gut health that really matter. We're going to talk about exactly what the gut microbiome is. I'm sure you've heard of, gut microbes, gut microbiome. What does that actually mean? We'll get some key definitions out of the way first. We'll also then focus on some common myths around gut health and dispel them effectively to really cut through that noise as I've mentioned. We'll then look at things like prebiotics, postbiotics, probiotics. What are they? Do we need them? Is it really necessary? We'll cut through the noise there as well. And then we'll talk about some common gut health habits that you can focus on to start today to really improve your gut health and your overall vitality. So, without any further ado, let's get into this. If you see me glancing to the side here ever so slightly, it's because I've got a long list of notes on my trusty little laptop here that I'd like to read through to make sure I'm staying on topic and not waffling on for too much because, I'm a bit of a serial waffler. I tend to get sidetracked, so this is here to keep me on track. Before we get started, have a little sip of my water here. Lubricate the mouth, get the juices flowing. Top tip to start things out, keep yourself hydrated. It's great for gut health. But yeah, let's get into this. Starting with exactly what the gut microbiome is. Effectively, it's just a concoction, a collection of trillions of tiny little bacteria, viruses, fungi, all coinciding and living mainly within our large intestine. Now, the gut microbiome does consist of the small intestine and, other bits and pieces in the gut itself, but it mainly resides in our large intestine. A good analogy that I like to think of is, think of your gut microbiome as a rainforest. I know it sounds crazy, but there's all sorts of different things happening in the rainforest. You've got your big, your big animals, you've got your tiny little insects, you've got all your different sorts of plants and how they all, interact with each other and coincide with each other and feed on each other. It's like a whole ecosystem in there. So that's the way I want you to think of your gut microbiome. It's full of all sorts of different things. It's a crazy environment in there. And the more diverse the rainforest, the healthier it tends to be. And the same can be said for our gut microbiome. So more diversity in our gut microbes, the healthier it is. So among those trillions of bacteria, virus, fungi, everything that's, inside our gut, the more diversity we have, the more variety we have, the better. We'll talk about how we can get that diversity and variety in just a moment here. What influences our gut microbiome? Now, there's a lot of different factors. A lot of it can be genetic, so that's one thing to consider. So at birth, we will take, a lot of the microbes from our mother, so that's facts, but also it could be heavily influenced and tweaked with dietary changes. It's also impacted by medication, things like antibiotics, which can have quite a drastic impact. Under diet, I include things like the impact of alcohol, how that can impact our gut microbiome, but also lifestyle. Exercise can have a big impact, stress levels, sleep. We'll get onto that all in just a moment here. But we'll start by busting some myths, okay? So with some key definitions out of the way there. As I say, I'm going to try and fly through this, provide a really, really high level sort of base level understanding of gut health so that you can take away the basics, and if there's anything specific you want to see, just let me know in the comments down below and I'll dive into some areas in a bit more detail. But we'll start by busting some common myths. First one being all bacteria are bad. This is simply not true. Our gut microbiome is testament to that. It's full of, as I've said, trillions, billions of tiny little bacteria that work in harmony to make sure that we're healthy, helps to reduce our inflammation, supports digestion and all these sorts of different things. So, the fact that people suggest that all bacteria are bad is simply not true. Our body actually thrive on this bacteria. Okay, there's certainly some good bacteria and bad bacteria. Some are better than others. Some strains are, linked with certain disease and whatever else. But the notion that all bacteria are bad is simply not true. Another one, which is one that I hate this word, detox. You need to detox your gut. What a load of I'll bleep that out. What a load of nonsense. With that, people say this like, you need to do a juice cleanse, or you need to detox your gut with this, you need to eliminate this from your diet, you need to do this, and certainly there is a time and a place for, an elimination approach to identify something that might be causing inflammation in your gut, sort of stripping back to reintroduce foods. But the fact that, these people do juice cleanses and make thousands of pounds out of promoting it is just, makes me sick. What do you think that our liver and kidneys are there for? That's exactly what our liver and kidneys do. They're there to sort of process all of the rubbish out, and cleanse the body and the gut. Anyway, so, detoxing your gut is not, a thing, really. Probiotics fix your gut health. Not necessarily true. Probiotic supplements I'm referring to here. Certainly there may be a time and a place for a probiotic supplement for certain people, but you're much better off getting your probiotics from whole foods, but we'll get onto that in just a moment. Everybody should avoid gluten and dairy. Not true. It's simply not true. Certainly people with celiac disease should avoid gluten because of the sensitivity there, and certainly people with a lactose intolerance should be wary of any dairy products for the same reason. It can cause some inflammation there, but in general, unless you're completely intolerant, things like gluten and things like dairy may even help support the diversity of your gut microbiome. So that's not wholly true. And the final one I've got here is that bloating is a result of poor gut health. Now, whilst there is certainly some truth to this, often the case, it can just be simply a matter of, a normal reaction after a meal you've eaten, or, if you've eaten a particularly fibrous meal, that can certainly be the case. Often people, you notice that they're bloated and blame it on poor gut health. It's not necessarily true, okay? So with some myths dispelled and some sort of misnomers put to bed, let's move on to some more key definitions, okay? Starting with one of my favourites, which is prebiotics. Let's talk about the difference between prebiotics, postbiotics, or prebiotics, probiotics, and postbiotics. Starting with prebiotics, which is effectively fibre. Okay, so fibre that feeds the gut bacteria. All those microbes that we've got in our gut. Prebiotics and fibre are what those bacteria, those microbes actually feed on. So we'll get that from our veg, any fibrous foods, whole grains. So things like nuts, seeds, beans, legumes are all fantastic sources of fibre. Fruit, I don't know if I've already mentioned that. But they are, as I say, the food that our gut microbes feed on. Now, probiotics are the microbes themselves. They're the live cultures that reside within our gut that feed on those prebiotics, okay? So you're looking at things like yogurt, kefir, cheeses, fermented cabbage, so like sauerkraut and kimchi and kombucha, fermented teas. These are all fantastic sources of probiotics, those live cultures, those live bacteria, and that colonize the gut. So that is what probiotics are. And then postbiotics are effectively the byproducts that are left, the energy that's left once the probiotics have fed and feasted on the prebiotics. So they can produce some beneficial byproducts like butyrate, for example, which has lots of anti-inflammatory effects and could be very beneficial in the gut itself. So that is what prebiotics, probiotics, and postbiotics are. Just to give you a little, lowdown or a little top tip at this point in the video, I start my day every day with what I call the kefir bowl. I've made videos on this, so if you're interested, you can, drop a comment or, scroll through my channel. I'm sure you'll find me talking about kefir at some point. But I start my day with a bowl of kefir yogurt, have a little bit of Greek yogurt for those probiotics, and then I top it with lots of different various toppings. So I'll change it up every day. But, for example, I'll have some mixed berries, I'll have lots of different mixed nuts and seeds and cinnamon, spices, and I'll put it all on top of my kefir bowl. So I'm getting the probiotics from the kefir, as I've mentioned, and then all that fibre and prebiotics in the nuts, seeds, fruit. is feeding the probiotics. So I'm getting the diversity and colonization of the gut from the probiotics, and then I'm giving it all the food it needs, all the feed it needs with those prebiotics, okay? And then I get all those beneficial byproducts as a result, which are our postbiotics. Now, I've already given you one big tip there, but let's move on to some, really evidence-based gut health habits that you can follow and start with today. First one being, aim for 30 different plant-based foods every week. Now, that might sound like a lot, and you might be thinking, Jesus, how am I supposed to be doing that? But when you really break it down, it becomes pretty simple, okay? So plant-based foods include things like, I've already mentioned, nuts, fruits, vegetables, beans, legumes, but then we're also talking spices, we're also talking herbs. You can see how that starts to get a lot easier to hit your 30 plus plant-based foods per week. Now, the beauty of this is that diversity and that variety proves so beneficial for our gut health because, I've already mentioned the importance of diversity, that rainforest analogy. The more that we can put in our gut, the better it's going to thrive and the better it's going to be. It's going to reduce our inflammation. So just another little top tip, 70% of our immune system resides in the gut. Okay, so how are we supposed to expect ourselves to be functioning at 100% and, avoiding sickness, avoiding inflammation if we're not, optimizing for our gut health? So look after your gut and it will look after you. We can do that by, opting for 30 different plant-based foods per week. A great way to do this is have what I've stolen this from scientist named Tim Spector. He comes under a lot of, controversy, but, I like his point here is what he calls a variety jar. Effectively, it's just a pot of mixed nuts and seeds. You can throw in a pack of mixed nuts and a pack of mixed seeds and you could have 10 different plant-based foods in there without even trying. Then when you cook your dinner, you put in oregano, a bit of parsley, some paprika, a bit of cumin, and you've got 4 or 5 different options there as well. And then, once you've had your veg and your different fruit throughout the week, it's quite easily done to get to that sort of 30 plant-based foods per week. Number 2, I've already mentioned it with the kefir, but fermented foods, fantastic for those probiotics and gut health. Some other examples I've already mentioned, but, just your yogurts, your fermented cheeses, kefir, kimchi, miso, kombucha. I'm trying to think of some different other examples, but they are some ones off the top of my head. So try those. You might start by, just having 1 or 2, introducing some kefir, perhaps a small amount with some Greek yogurt, and then slowly diversifying your options there. Of course, if you're having things like sauerkraut, they also contribute to your 30 plant-based foods, so you can double down there too. On the opposite end of the spectrum, it's also important to limit or reduce certain foods as well. So your ultra-processed foods are going to ruin your gut health. They've got too many additives, too many sugars. We're talking, gums and flavorings and sort of all these sorts of different things that they throw in foods nowadays that, are not beneficial for gut health. Apologies if you can hear the sirens, by the way, my apologies. But they're all going to disrupt your gut microbiome. They're going to increase the intestinal permeability of your gut, which means, we've all heard of perhaps leaky gut. That's where we can get, stomach cramps and bowel issues, and it's not very pleasant. And they just promote that inflammation. Again, 70% of our immune system resides in the gut. Look after it, please. You won't get sick, trust me. No word of a lie. I don't remember the last time I was ill. I prioritise my gut health. Don't get me wrong. I've given it a battering a fair few times. Had a few, too many beers or whatever else. But very rarely do I eat badly. So I'm sort of compensating for those poor times by prioritising gut health around that. And just a point on that: if I know I'm going to have a few beers, look, it's part of life, or you're going out for a meal or whatever it may be. You're going to indulge a little bit. Really look after your gut in the days or the hours leading into that event. And then again, really look after your gut in the hours and days that precede that event. It can really help to sort of mitigate the impact on your gut health. You might notice that you get, less drastic of a hangover and things like that. It's certainly been the case with myself. It might just be a personal anecdote, but again, very anecdotal evidence, but I'm using myself as a case study there. Anyway, point number 4. Reduce your stress, sleep well, and exercise often. pretty simple. They are free of my 4 pillars of health from my, Girl in Nutrition philosophy. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, I'll leave a link in the description down below that will, explain a little bit more about my services so you can find out more details on that. But part of my 4 pillar philosophy at Girl in Nutrition is, sleep optimization, exercise, stress management, and they all fall under my meta pillar, which is of course nutrition and where my area of expertise lie. But if we're stressed, there's been so much connection between the gut and the brain via the gut-brain axis. So that is connected via the vagus nerve, which connects the enteric nervous system, which is the nervous system within our gut, which most scientists are acknowledging as effectively the second brain nowadays, because there's so much evidence coming out to support, how what we eat impacts our emotions and our cognitive state. So if we're stressed, chances are the gut is going to sort of come out in sympathy for us. Okay, what helps your mind helps your gut, and vice versa. Exercise certainly helps the mind. Sleeping well certainly helps the mind. If it means some deep breathing exercises to reduce stress, that's certainly going to help your gut too. So, breathing into your diaphragm and into your gut can certainly help reduce your stress level. So that's something to consider as well. And then the final point I want to make here, I made it at the start of the video. I'm going to take another sip of water here. But keeping yourself nicely hydrated to maintain your gut health. It can aid digestion, it can help with nutrient absorption, bowel regularity, it can break down food, soften stool, and facilitates the movement of waste through the digestive tract. Just a few notes that I've got written down there. So it's really helpful and beneficial for our gut health to keep ourselves nicely hydrated. Depending on how much you're exercising, we should be aiming for at least 2 litres, if not upwards of 3. Certainly I drink probably close to 4 litres of water per day, with often an electrolyte as well to enhance the absorption and hydration. But yeah, those are the points that I wanted to make. Those are some really beneficial sort of habits. So just to run through them once more, we've got eat your 30 different plant-based foods per week, get your fermented foods in the diet, limit your ultra-processed foods. So just some examples of ultra-processed foods. Sorry, I skipped over that. Your things that come in a packet, effectively. I trust that you're pretty well educated on what comes in a packet and looks ultra-processed. So your sweets, your trans fatty foods, so your deep fried foods, your pizzas, your French fries, all these sorts of things, chocolate bars, biscuits, these sorts of things, they're all ultra processed. They're no good for your gut microbiome. Prioritize your whole foods. Again, this is part of my philosophy under a broader bracket of sustainability. One of the 5 contributing factors I have there is whole foods, so get your whole foods involved. Again, there's a link in the description if you want to learn a little bit more about my philosophy and what I offer as a coach and as a service. Where was I? Sleep optimization. Make sure you're sleeping well. Aim for the same bedtime each night. Aim to wake up at the same time each day. Get your 8 to 9 hours sleep. It will prove so beneficial for your gut. Exercise regularly. Again, has so many benefits. Manage your stress. Again, has so many benefits. And keep yourself nicely hydrated. But that is, as I say, a very high-level overview of gut health and what it is, giving you some key definitions there, some habits to take away and focus on, some things to avoid, some myths have also been busted. The gut is literally a living ecosystem within us. You need to nurture it, look after it, protect it, and trust me, it will look after you. I've noticed it's been the most game-changing, life-changing thing that I ever did, starting to prioritize my gut health. Since I've been, actively trying to eat more fermented foods and including more plant-based foods in my diet, it's drastically changed, how I show up and perform from an athletic standpoint, the mental clarity that I get. I don't get any afternoon crashes anymore. I'm recording this at 2:30, and hopefully I don't seem too down or dejected. I'm feeling pretty energetic, so it just goes to show that this does indeed work. But yeah, forget the fads as well. Forget those juice cleanses and detoxes, gut health detox. If you see that, just know it's a red flag and avoid at all costs. But yeah, just to draw things to a conclusion here, I'll repeat it once more. That phrase: look after your gut, and it will look after you. I mean that when I say it. follow the tips I've, advised you with in this video. And if, you've got any questions or you want me to explore any of these topics in a little bit more detail, drop a comment down below, or, go and check out my Instagram. You can DM me over there, NGB, to get a closer look at my program, or you can just drop me a DM in general and ask me anything that you want to know. I'm always happy to help. I mean that genuinely from the bottom of my heart. If you've enjoyed this video or you've learned something from it, you've taken something away, please consider dropping a like, commenting and subscribing. I'm releasing 2 to 3 YouTube videos every week providing value on topics just like this, so I'd really appreciate it if you could show your support. It really does help me out and shows that what I'm putting out there is indeed helping people. But other than that, that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on today. Once more, I hope you've learned yourself something. If there's anything you want me to move on to, again, let me know in the comments down below. But other than that, if you want to check out what I offer as a coach once more, that link is in the description down below. I'll leave that with you and remind you before I round things out. But you have yourself a wonderful rest of the day. I appreciate you watching me waffle for 20 minutes. It means a lot. But I'll see you all in the next one in a bit.